us sports moms have something to say.
Yes, we do.
We'll have a chance to interview across the board, from athletes to the parents to the coaches to even the trainers.
And we're not afraid to share our journey. We're not afraid to tell other moms what we went through in order to raise up a student athlete.
So I believe that it's inspirational.
We able to tell our story, the good and the bad.
We can give back positive information.
Absolutely.
You know, we can empower them.
Yeah, I think it's time for the mothers to be a voice.
Yeah, that's it.
It's time for us to let you know what's going on.
Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys, what's up? It's Karen. I'm your host tonight. I am solo alone tonight, but we are moving forward tonight to bring you some great information. I'm doing the technical, I'm doing it all tonight. So excuse me if we get some bloopers in there, but it's all right. We're moving forward. So tonight I'm by myself, my host. They all had something else. My other moms had something else to do, but I am excited to bring on our guest tonight, Mr. David Schuman. He is the founder of the Underclassmen Combine, the National Underclassmen Combine. So you guys help me to show Mr. David. And if I got the name wrong, he'll help me though.
It's great to be on. Thank you for having me on. David Schuman, NUC Sports, used to be known as the National Underclassmen Combines. That was the original full name of everything, but we kind of shortened it up to NUC Sports. I'm really glad to be on with you. All right. Well, I think we may have lost our host here. So, I'll give a little background. Dave Schuman, NUC Sports, founder and CEO. And we originally started the events way back in 2005, focusing on trying to figure out a way to help athletes get more recruiting exposure. And back then it was a completely different time. That's almost 15 years. Actually, it's more than 15 years ago. And we really focused on testing the athletes, evaluate them on their skills, and then providing that information to college coaches. Really started before we had Facebook, and I think Twitter came shortly after. But back then people were just sending out DVDs to college coaches, and this kind of gave athletes some really quick information fast. And we really accelerated our growth to running events all over the country to really try and provide athletes the exposure that they need. So welcome back. I took over hosting duties briefly.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. I appreciate it. Oh my God. See, that's awesome. You were able to just jump right in. I told you this internet has just been going crazy. It has been going crazy. So go ahead and tell me. Go ahead and do your spiel.
Yeah, so I was saying we started in 2005. This obviously that's 15. This will be our 16th year doing it. And when we originally started the event, it was really designed to give underclassmen, which is everybody the name National Underclassmen Combines, give them the opportunity to showcase themselves. Back then, athletes most of them got offered at the beginning of their senior year. So the athletes from our camp, we were really the first camp to run it for underclassmen. And I remember I pitched it in 2000, a couple of years after being into it. I pitched it to Nike. I said, hey, why don't you run some events for underclassmen? They kind of laughed at me. But obviously now everybody runs events for younger athletes. But we were the first to do it. And it was pretty cool because that first event, which had, I think, 140 athletes at it in New Jersey, I think 21 of those kids went on to Division I schools. And some famous guys that you might know, Tyrod Taylor, who played for the Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills. He's somewhere else now, I believe, maybe in Indianapolis now. And then Joe Hayden, who played for the Browns and has been all pro. And so those are the two most famous guys from those that very first event, and kind of was a launching pad. And a lot has changed in recruiting over the years, which is really interesting. Back then, people were sending DVDs to college coaches. Yeah. So that's how it was done. Quickly moved to the internet. I've also been a high school coach for a long time. Been a high school coach since 2002. Been a head coach for at 4 different places. I'm at the 4th place now, Red Bank Regional. But I've been around during all those iterations, from when it went from literally VHS video to now where everything's through Huddle. But there was a time period where it was, from like 2007 to like 2012, where it was YouTube was a big deal for that. Now it's kind of a secondary thing because Huddle's so big. But I've seen how that kind of all worked and the iterations of that process. And our events have really evolved as well. At first we really just ran events. That's what we did. We ran combines, and a combine is where you test them like you would see in the NFL. Now the NFL combine's televised. So a lot of people have familiarity with what a combine is. The 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, the broad jump. That's the main portion of it. But what we do is a lot of skills and one-on-ones and agility stuff as well, to get a kind of a full evaluation of them. But it really has evolved. Like now it's become, we do a ton of stuff online. We do a ton of things where we put out all kinds of content to help the athletes along. And I would say like 98% of that is free. So we're putting out all kinds of free content to help them. Whereas in the old days, basically we ran the event and the content came from the event. Now the content really comes before that, and the event is then kind of an information push out to the schools because they have their own process, and that process has evolved tremendously.
Yeah. Now there was something that you said about, when you started, you're the underclassmen, and now it's evolved. And it really has evolved because right now it's a push for like 7th and 8th graders. They are becoming MVP and they're wearing championship rings, and the colleges are going even younger to go after the kids now. So I'm just thinking about what your mindset was when you were, had that thought and that baby of thinking about that and having to move in your idea. And what if you had, what if you did move in it, but you nursed it, and I'm just thinking about what pushed you, what drove you to continue in your vision of going after the underclassmen being exposed and.
Yeah, my original vision was I was the head. I had just taken over a program, was a very small high school. It was the high school I went to, and I had taken over as head coach, and I had some really talented younger players. And one of them, his name is Steve Baharnas. He ended up playing in the NFL. He just recently was playing in the XFL. Played in, which now is, I guess, went under, but he was coming up into high school, and where we are in New Jersey, it's not as big in Texas, but a lot of the private schools are real big and grab players. And whereas in Texas, the public schools really are the kings and in the football programs because of the large ISDs. But in New Jersey, it was a little different, and especially in North Jersey, where I was originally from. So, everybody wanted him to come play for them. And so I created this program kind of with him in mind. It wasn't, and he attended it and did really well, and it helped him get exposure. And he ended up getting offers as a sophomore. He ended up playing at Rutgers, and was 7th round draft pick in the NFL. And but that was the original intent: was how could I create something that can help athletes who may not go to the best program or the biggest program. That was the original intent. And how could I get those athletes exposure a little bit earlier? And that with that in mind, that's where the event came from. And then it really, really grew and took off. And we realized all these different other opportunities to be able to get exposures for kids for big schools, small schools, older kids, younger kids. But really the sweet spot was really the freshmen and sophomores at the time. And that was the group we really focused on. We actually, for a long time, wouldn't let 8th graders into the event unless the kid was fully mature physically, and the parent really had a lobby for it, and show us, kind of his size. They would have to send us like, a picture of what, how big he was. So we knew that he could handle it. But that obviously has changed a lot since then. I still think from a recruiting standpoint, the sweet spot is really the sophomore year going into junior year, where you could really, if you are good enough that you end up starting fairly early, a lot of good things can happen for you. But the way that college has now come is, that junior year, guys are getting, you want to be ready for that junior year, that if you're just starting for the first time as a junior, especially at a big school like DeSoto, a lot of guys won't start maybe to their junior year. By going to the events, you could kind of build your name long before that. And then when you are starting, you could kind of hit the ground running, and your film starts to match with what you've done at events.
Right, and that's so true, because at DeSoto, our team, we're 300 strong as far as all the different age group, the different teams, and so it's really like you got to wait your turn unless you are just top of the top, and so for my son, I didn't even know about recruiting as a mom. I didn't even know. I mean, it wasn't even in my language as far as recruiting or possibility of getting a scholarship. My husband was a coach, and my son played football all along, but it wasn't even in my thought pattern until about the 10th grade. Hey, you can get a scholarship to go play football. Okay, how do you do that? And so that's when I started to research about that it's up to the parent to help their son get recruited. And so that's when I started looking for camps and combines, and where he could go and get better. And that's how I found you. And my son attended your combine. Now tell me, what's the difference between a camp and a combine? Help me with that one.
Now we kind of, our combine is kind of almost a camp now. It's kind of evolved, but originally the combine is really focused on testing. So, when you hear a combine, that you're going to be tested probably on the 40-yard dash, some version of the vertical jump, broad jump, maybe the shuttle run, maybe the 3-cone, but you're going to get some sort of timing and testing to really evaluate, how fast you are, how high you can jump, those kind of things. Whereas a camp has many different forms. A camp has a lot more football components to it, where you're doing drills. You might be doing agility drills, positional drills. You might be doing some 7-on-7 stuff, some 1-on-1s. And it could be highly instructional based. It could be competition based. So camp kind of has a little bit more involved. Originally we were combine, and really testing was the main part. We didn't do a ton of agility drills. This is going back to like 2005, 2006. We probably did about a half hour of it. Now it's probably more on the camp side of it. Even though we do the testing, We do a lot more on the drills and stuff because the kids want to do that, and who doesn't? That's the fun part. So we really evolved that, and but yeah, it's a combination of competition and instruction, and so when you see like college camps, like by TCU has one, or Texas, those camps might have some testing in it, but the primary focus of it will be like the drills and the positional work and the agility stuff. To see where they are from a kind of a football skill standpoint.
Yeah, and I know back then that you had to be verified. Those, how fast you run and your vertical and all that kind of stuff. You were verified, and so when you go to these different camps, is one of your combine, is that one that can verify that you actually um, ran those routes? And I think like when you get listed like on the ESPN top 100,
Right.
top 300, it'll have their weight and their drills and stuff, and it'll say verified, like
Right.
somebody officially verified them.
Right. So we're a separate entity from those guys. So where we'll have them at our events, but we for years we had partnerships with them, but both parties kind of went away from that because it's so easy to get information out with the internet. So they can grab your information really quickly and, with an email find out, hey, did this kid run this at your camp? Yes. Pretty simple. In the beginning, it wasn't like that. So it was much harder to verify what somebody did do, and the trusted sources that are out there were limited. They're still limited now. So like we're partners with the NCAA. We're one of their NCAA certified recruiting services.
Oh, okay.
But there's so many events, and it's very confusing for parents now. Like I said, when we first started, it was us, Nike events, maybe Under Armour had something,
Right.
a handful of companies maybe.
Right.
When your son went, there was probably still only about a handful of companies doing it on a national basis. Now, people running events for fourth graders, it's all over, and
Right.
that part has changed radically. And it's also confusing for parents because of that. So, I try to tell parents not to I used to really get so focused on the recruiting end of it. And now I'm kind of more, because the way it is, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to take, let's say you come to our event and the parent films it at the event and posts it on Twitter. Like it happens like that now. Whereas before, like you would have to call us up. Hey, can I get a copy of the video? Like you don't have to worry about basically the parents video with their phone. They put it out there. So you don't have to go through a whole convoluted process. So I said, I try to tell them, focus on competing and learning when you're there, because really you could go video and have it and tell the coach he ran it at this event, and the coach can easily verify that by reaching out to that program if they wanted to. So that part's changed, so they can really focus on the competing. I always say, hey, listen, if you want a video from the stands or get close to the fence and video, you can certainly do that, because that's a quick and dirty way to get your information out there right away. And it's no different than what anybody else is sending out there, because the phone is so good at being able to put information. And you don't need to have a big handheld camera to do it. You could find out what your son ran. You could videoed his 40 from the stands with an iPad, or, and you put that, you cut it up real quick on your phone and you put it on Twitter, send it out to coaches, and they could recognize you real quick. So those are efficient ways to do things that years ago, even though we had the internet, people didn't have the iPhone, couldn't do all the things it could do now. The capability to edit a movie right on your phone wasn't there. It is now. You could do that really quickly. Yeah, I mean, you could literally, if you wanted to, stream your own combine right from the stands. I mean, you could.
Right.
So those capabilities are there. So the key part of these events is to go out and compete and be ready to compete, because there are a lot of talented kids there, and for you to stand out, you really want to be able to be ready and mentally ready and physically ready to compete.
So is that the message for the parents? Is the purpose of your combine is just getting the kids more practice in competing, especially if they are sitting on the bench and not necessarily getting that playing time?
Absolutely. So, there's exceptions with that. So you go run a great 40, and even though you haven't yet stepped on the field, or you're 6'5", but yet you haven't stepped on the field, but you're going to, and you play like at a program, well, DeSoto's is probably top 5 program every year in the country, but something close to that, right? A big school where it is harder to get on the field. By going to an event and testing well and getting some measurables, that could kind of prime the college coach to know, hey, okay, let me watch this kid's film as soon as he does step foot on the field, because we already know, let's say he runs a 4.6 at 40-yard dash. We already know he's athletic enough to play for us. But we want to know that he's a good football player as well on the field and pads. So it's like a matching process. And sometimes one thing's ahead of the other. Ultimately, the goal in the end is to have both of them matching, the ability to be a great athlete for your size and to have great film that shows you're a great football player. Those are the keys to playing at the highest of the highest levels. And everybody's doesn't match it. There's some people that are on the field now and got to work on their speed, but they just have to be really good football players. And then others are really athletic, but their football skills haven't caught up yet, and they're not yet on the field. And so that's where events can really help. Showcase yourself, especially, I would say it's great for, once someone becomes truly recognized, we say, hey, listen, we'd love to have you at a camp, but if you're already, you already have 20 offers, focus on what you have to do to become a better football player. And if you feel going to a camp is going to do that, then absolutely, by all means. But you got to focus on that. It's really good for players who are trying to get to that point, need a little bit more, or younger players, in my opinion. And I really feel that when you get to the point where you're accomplished, well, then maybe you play in an all-star game your senior year, when you're done. Maybe you do 1 or 2 elite events. Kids now don't even go to, like, if they got a bunch of offers, they may not even go to a college camp in the summer and compete at it. They just might do the drills so they can get better at their own skill set and spend more time with those coaches so they could get to know and figure out which place they want to go to.
Right.
So that part's changed a lot. That wasn't always that way. But I think it does put the athlete a little bit more in control and to know what stage they're at. And this is the hardest thing for parents. You got to know what stage you're at in the process.
Yeah.
And knowing what stage you're at and kind of being able to put, like I always say this, we all know that Johnny's the best football player on the field. We know that you think that. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes you have to be able to assess where he is and kind of step back from it and say, okay, we need to do these things because, coaches aren't talking to him right now. What do we need to do to get coaches to pay attention to him? So there's a lot to that process, but you want to know where you are because that really helps focus what you do. And, if you have a really good high school coach, he can really help guide you with that. Some people have that luxury. Some people don't. But it's important for you to educate yourself on it. And the one thing I always say is that you can't do is just because you know somebody or your neighbor had a child that went Division I doesn't mean your child is going to go Division I, and their process can be very different. So each person's process is different. I played at University of Connecticut. Back then it was FCS. Now it's Division I. and I went there on scholarship. But, my process was very different than, a person that ended up going to Penn State, and understanding what that process is and getting the information for your situation. That's really important, because you can't just do exactly what the other person did.
That right there, you just hit the nail on the head with the hammer, whatever they're saying is. But
Right.
um, it's so easy as a parent, like you said. I think my son is the best. We all
Right.
think our kids is the best. But at what point do we really, really see where they are? Because like I said, I started putting my son in all the camps, and we was going, in everything. I was putting him in everything. But one thing that I needed to understand is, and I didn't know it then, is about his size. You
Right.
know, uh, colleges come and look at your size. They have to be measurable. And so, whereas I thought my son was going to grow some more, but he didn't. And that's what kind of shunned him from getting the offers that he would have got if had he been 6'1", 6'2". He stayed
Mm-hmm.
at 5'11".
Mm-hmm.
And then that even goes to the position that he played. Because he wasn't that elite size, he needed to find the position that fit his size. And so, at what point, as a parent, we need to evaluate that, uh, as far as what position their kid should be groomed in playing because of their size versus where they think they want to play.
That is a fantastic question. And that is I would say, like, it's fortunately and unfortunately the most important thing that you need to know as you approach the process. How fast really is your child, and how big is he going to get? Okay. And that's a hard thing. I mean, I would say, like, look at both parents, kind of look at most of the relatives, and you kind of have a framework. It doesn't always work that way.
Right.
My roommate in college, his father was 5'10" and his mother was 5'4", and he's 6'5".
Oh.
So, like, that makes no sense, right? So it doesn't always work that way, but you do want to try to find the right position. Obviously, the coach can help you with that, and that's sometimes hard for parents. Like, if the coach is putting your son in a certain position, it might also dictate to you what level you might be. So if, let's say, you're on the shorter side, you're a lineman, and you're 5'9" and you're 235 pounds, and you're playing guard and you're very good, but you're not going to go Division I as an offensive guard at 5'9", 235. You're just too short. So, but you might be able to play at the Division III level. And that's the thing, that there's so many programs playing football in America, and it's one of the amazing things about what football does is, like, I would say it gives every kid an opportunity to possibly go to a better school than they might have normally went to if they were just a regular student, right? So,
Right.
if I was a regular student, I probably would have been going to, like, my local 4-year college. I was able to go to university because I was a great football player and I was a good student. I wasn't elite, but I was a good student. And those kind of things are important. And that put me into a way better place in life to be able to open my own business, to think about things in that way. If I didn't go to a university, I may not have met people that could have helped me down that path. So I think that it's important to assess that and understand where you fall into. And you want to, I think by the time you become a sophomore, most football players have hit puberty. And when you get to that point, you can really start to realize, okay, where is my range? And when I send stuff out for my own players, I always say, here's the range that I think my players fall into. Like, I think he's a Division I player, FBS player, but he's at minimum an FCS player. It depends on what you think about him. And I try to give that range, and you want to kind of start to understand what range is, because that'll help you target what camps you go to in the summer, what coaches you reach out to. And unfortunately, and you've probably seen this too at DeSoto, so as many kids have gone on to great programs, and there's an abundance from DeSoto, you probably can name dozens of kids who should have went somewhere but kind of made the mistake in their process and either didn't even get an opportunity because of it. And I think that's an important part. Like you mentioned, it's the parents' responsibility. Depending on the high school, like I have a lot of knowledge in this area, so I'm able to guide my high school kids and help them a lot more than maybe a high school coach who doesn't have that knowledge in the area. And what parents need to understand is, just because your high school coach could be a fantastic football coach, but may not be great on the recruiting side. So that's really important so you might win a lot of ball games, but if that's not his forte, then you may not have as many players recruited, and you won't understand why. That's why you have to take that responsibility on yourself and work with the coach in partnership. And trust me when I say that, like, and I tell this to my players all the time, the more proactive you are, the better I can do my job. So I'm really proactive with schools for my players, but and obviously on the NUC side, this is what I do. So, but the more proactive they are, I found that the more proactive they are, they've always been in way better position than if it was just me pushing from my side. And it's time and time again that the players who work as hard on their own process as I'm working to help them, they always land in the best spot for them. And that's the key, the best spot for you, right? You want to go to a school, especially now, college coaches. I mean, they change jobs like they change clothes, right?
Right.
So it's important to choose a place that you really think you want to be at. So, and it's changed radically since I started, but the players are more in control now than they ever have been. With the portal and all those kind of things, you really have a lot more control as to if you make a mistake, to be able to change that mistake. And that's, I think, a real important thing, is that to understand that you do have control. So take the time to figure out the right place for you.
Right. Now, we had a guy named Rick Allen on the show, and he was a previous NCAA employee. And so he does a newsletter called Informed Athlete, and he educated us on the possibility of seniors getting another year of eligibility, which is going to push back on the possible seniors that are coming out of high school because of what's going on. So how do you think the high school athletes should deal with that? I mean, because that's going to cause a bottleneck. That's going to cause a pushback. What's your thoughts and how you think the high school athletes or the high school coaches should deal with that?
It's something that you're not able to control. So what ends up happening is you may have less scholarships available at each level, right? So that creates that bottleneck. And you have two bottlenecks now. So you have the bottleneck for this year. Hopefully this doesn't happen again and again, but if it does, we have problems that have nothing to do with sports, right? So, but it creates two bottlenecks, at least for this year. The second bottleneck being that the transfer portal, creates a situation where college coaches can grab a player from the portal that's already been playing and bring them in. So they're now saving 2 or 3, sometimes 5 scholarships for guys in the portal. So for high school athletes, there is a little bit of a squeeze. I mean, I've seen it as a high school coach. where they're slower to move on players than they used to be. They used to be much quicker on jumping on players. And this is really the last few years since the portal, a couple of years since the portals happened, because they can grab a player. And so, yeah, I think the key is to go through your process, but don't be married to where you think you belong. Find the right place, because some of those players that in the old days stayed at the school and kind of rode the bench and then one day climbed up, hopefully, or if they didn't, they just were, a backup. Those guys are transferring out and they're leaving and they're going to a place where they can play. And that takes away from at that school, maybe 2 or 3 or maybe 5 players that would have been recruited at high school. That's one of the things that the NCAA is trying to figure out. How do we handle this? Because we don't want to limit opportunity, but that's one of the unintended consequences of the portal. So once you get into a school, like you choose a school, the players have a lot more control over their future, meaning they're not locked into a place if a coach leaves, that kind of stuff. But getting to that point is a little bit harder now because of the portal. So, that is, and only over time are we going to really see, how that evolves. They'll probably change certain things there. But that is they have to recognize that there might be a few less scholarships at each level.
Yeah, you know how they have a red shirt and they have a gray shirt. Maybe they're gonna come up with another color for COVID, whatever's going on this year for the kids who are going into, to identify that group of kids
Right.
for this year. Come up
Yeah,
with
I
another
mean, and they do have, they've gotten creative with scholarships. I can't remember if it's I think it's Greenshirting, where they can, it's either green or blue shirting. And by the way, there's so many of when I played, there was red shirt. That was it. I think there's like white, green, blue, gray, and red now. But I think it's so if I make a mistake on it, get the point of the message is that they are now having a situation where they are taking an athlete into the school, and what they're doing is that their scholarship does not become activated until they step foot on campus, which allows them to not use one of the scholarships. So that scholarship then applies for next year. So I think they call that Greenshirting. So that's an unusual thing as well. So that's some of the things that they've used. So it's important for the athletes to go and get familiar with that. I think you got a question there.
Yeah, Miss Shannon says, with less scholarship, how would that affect college and enrollment?
With the colleges and their enrollment, with less scholarships, how will this affect the colleges and their enrollment? Well, they still have the same scholarships available, but as far as their enrollment and as far as, well, it depends on the levels. Division I, FCS, they have set number of scholarships, so it's 85, it's 65, and so those are the same number of scholarships no matter what. It's just how they apply them, and they're creative with applying some to the next year so they can bring in more people now. But at the lower levels, that's a very good question. If there's less money available, how at the Division III and Division II level, where most people are paying to go there, if there's less scholarships, that's significantly going to affect the enrollment. And in a lot of the smaller colleges, the number of players on a football team, especially Division III, actually boosts those colleges' enrollment and brings them revenue. So they're trying to, let's say a school costs $50,000 a year, they're trying to scholarship them in academic money $20,000 to $30,000 so they can get 150 football players to come to their school, because that boosts their own enrollment and the programs that they could have for other students.
I mean, I mean, my head just blew with that because, with the colleges being shut down, they're losing money.
Right.
And, what they would normally be making money from is their basketball teams and that's going to trickle down in even being able to offer as many scholarships, which is going to affect
Absolutely.
the enrollment. I mean, it's just gonna keep trickling down.
For this year, especially, you're going to have, I mean, there's already a few, smaller schools that have shut down, right? Because they can't afford it. It's a great question. And this is probably a question we could spend the whole show on, probably. And it's one of those things where, and I'll use this example. So there's a conference called the Northeast Conference. It's primarily in the area where I live. It's FCS. They're allowed to have 65 scholarships, but I think they are building it up, and I think they might use 45, or maybe they have the full allotment now. But those schools don't have as big an endowment as, say, like Texas, and they have to go in. They may not be able to afford some of those scholarships for the players. I missed that question there. What did he?
He was just making a comment that group of kids is defined by a gray shirt.
Oh, gray shirt. There you go. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the gray shirts. No, the green shirt is when they can enroll in the fall. The gray shirt is when they have to wait till the spring to enroll, or the ones who come in early beforehand and their scholarship doesn't apply to the fall. So the green is they actually make them walk on, and then they give them a scholarship when they show up. So they're not a recruited scholarship. So, but the gray shirt is when they delay that scholarship to the following semester, or they bring them like you'll see this with freshmen that enroll early. They won't actually start them till the fall, and their scholarship won't count until the fall. So there's slightly different things with green and gray, but it's the same concept. It's delaying where the scholarship count is to the next semester or the next season.
But that would cause is for a lot of parents depend on the scholarship in order to get their kids, especially in these D1 schools.
Right.
So that's going to cause the parents to have to get loans
100% problem.
get
Yes.
into the school until they can get a scholarship. So
Absolutely.
it's just
So that part, that's how, especially at the highest level, that's how they've become creative with some of these things. And there's two schools of it. Like the schools like it because they can get creative, but for the families, it's definitely much more difficult. It's not a bird in the hand. You until you step foot, you don't know that you're going to get that money, and they can. One of the things about scholarships, they could pull them at any time. They can decide they're not going to give it to you, so that's tough. College. What do we got here? College.
By waiving a test that will help students and athletes because college will look at the students from a holistic review, which will help their student athlete. I think she's just making a statement.
Yes, could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think college as a whole, you can see right now, obviously, most of the students are going online, and how they're going to create that kind of a thing. I mean, there's going to be some trickle down effects that are going to be difficult. How it's going to affect athletics is yet to be known, but there's definitely going to be an effect. So you might, when we talk about, so waiving test scores is an interesting thing that has become a big thing with some of the schools for athletes. So when they have test optional, and your grades become more important, there's probably pros and cons to that. The pro is that if an athlete's a really good student, but maybe they grew up in an environment that they didn't start to learn till later, or maybe they had some disadvantaged situations, but they're a really good student, they don't have to worry about what their test is. The negative side is if you have a kid who's very smart but was lazy, he's not going to be able to get a high test score and then make up for it to be because that balance of scale. Now, from a sports standpoint, some of these questions are outside of sports, but from a sports standpoint, the college coaches in football in particular, every day, all day, they'd rather have the student that they know is the better student and less test scores because they know that person's going to work hard. If they got good grades, more than likely they're going to be hard workers. But that's a balancing thing. So
what happened when all the spring athletes that missed their season due to the COVID, the virus?
So the spring sport athletes, this is who right now it's in particular to. Hopefully, it doesn't extend beyond that.
Right.
So I know we'll miss football. I know I will.
All your camps is this summer, so
I know. Well, exactly. So what would happen for them? So those athletes are actually getting that year back,
right?
If they want it. And if they're on scholarship, obviously they're getting that paid for. Now, if you're at a lower level, Division II or Division III, you really kind of have a decision on your hands. So let's say you ran track or played baseball or softball or any tennis, whatever sports are going on in the spring. You kind of have if you're paying for school, even if you're at a Division I level and you're paying for school, you really have to think about is it worth me coming back another year because you're going to be paying for it? And I think that's the tough and disappointing part of this whole thing, which obviously none of us have control over kind of how this part is. But they are going to have the option to come back. So that is definitely there. And it's a really, really, I think, a good thing. NCAA right away said that those spring athletes can come back. They can get another year and they're going to have the opportunity to do that again next year.
Now, tell me about, I know when my son came to your combine, there was different levels. Like if you go and you place at one level, you get invited to another one and to another one. Is that the way you're still running it?
Yes. There was more levels back then, but now there's basically there's specialized position, which we didn't have back then. We had specialized position camps, which they can get invited to, like quarterback or receiver. And then we have our regular camps and showcases. And then in the summer, we have what top prospect camp, which we used to run. That was a great one. Yeah. We used to run in Oklahoma. We now run it in Georgia, in Atlanta. And that's like kind of the second level. And then we have an all-star game, which it pretty much, if you get invited to top prospect camp, you have the ability to go to all-star game. But we have limited spots in the all-star game, whereas a top prospect camp, we designate spots, but we really can add people if we need to. All the All-American games, we only have a certain number of spots so everybody can get, enough playing time. But yeah, it's really kind of two levels now and then positional based camps. Okay.
So how is what's going on affecting you, even though your camps are this summer? How are you handling this? What are you going to do?
Yeah, so we have a ton of camps in the spring and the early winter and throughout the spring. So right now, none of those camps are being run. Right now, basically the way it looks is we may not be able to run any camps until June timeframe in most of the country. Where I live in New Jersey, which is one of the hardest hit areas, may not be till July. So, and we're hoping for that. You know what I mean? We're hoping. So yeah, we're really hard hit from a business standpoint. I mean, we would be running 5 or 6 camps in a weekend right now to running 0. That's just kind of the reality of what it is. The one thing that we will do, and we're exploring this right now, even when we come back to running camps, we may take an approach where we're going to have small number of kids get evaluated at a time, because until there's a vaccine for this or something that we know we're going to work on something that we don't have large groups coming in at one time to one place. So our camps, even if we run them this summer, most of those camps will probably be, and we're working on this right now, some form of waves of groups. So you might have 20 kids come at 9 a.m., another 20 at 10 a.m., and instead of kind of spreading it all out, working them out for that time frame, and then bringing them back again the next day for that time frame, and spreading it out so 200 kids can go over 8 to 10 hours and get all the things that they need, get evaluated. But we're looking at that right now, and obviously what happens with, what comes down from the government with the guidelines as to what we can and can't do, we're obviously going to follow that to make sure everybody's safe.
Okay, so tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and with your camps and sign up.
Yeah, most of the athletes and parents reach out to me on Twitter at Coach Schuman, and that's just my last name like it's showing up here, coach in front of it, and then nucsports.com. And what's really cool about the nucsports.com site, it used to be just register and come to the camps. Now we have endless amounts of content on there. So from drills to articles to videos, all of it free to be able to help athletes, find their way through this process. You can really search and type in and find a ton of content that's available to you. Obviously, if you want to come to a camp or any of the recruiting programs we have, we'd love to be able to help you in any way we can. So
Awesome. So thank you so much. I think we had one more comment.
Sure.
Shannon, she says, how many athletes do you think will be lost in all of this? As far as, not that question is coming from, kids not being able to work out, or they're on their regimen of routine. And so now, since they're locked in, they're getting kind of laxy-daisy, and those who don't have stuff to work out, where they're getting out of shape, and the desires of playing the sport, do you think that we will lose a lot of athletes doing everything that's going on?
Yeah, it's upsetting to me that, there are kids that have resources to be able to work out still, meaning you have a nice big yard, you can go work out, you happen to have a little weight room in your house, you can go work out. And then there are kids who only can do manual stuff. I think what's been really good is coaches like myself and I see it all over Twitter, and there's a ton of coaches that have put out a lot of free information for what you could do if you don't have weights, and what you could do if you do have weights, what you could do if you can get to a park, what if you can't get to a park or a field. I think athletes are going to have to be more proactive. And I do think that there's a lot more personal responsibility here for the athletes, which is tough for some really young kids, because a lot of young kids are learning that there are, I would say, look, every program you go to, you have, no matter where it is in the country, you're going to have your kids that you don't have to tell them nothing, and they're going to do everything right.
Right.
But, most kids need coaches and teachers and parents to be able to help guide them.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, I think as a community, everybody has to be able to do their part to try and help them. And, whether, and that's just not just working out. Like with my kids, we do, we've been doing Google Meet calls every Monday and Wednesday. And it goes twofold. I go through plays and stuff like that with them, but it also gives me an opportunity to check in and know which kids are there and which kids aren't. And so we have like 80, 90 kids in the program, but we'll have like 40 kids on the call. So I'm like, well, where are these kids? Right? What are they doing? Maybe they don't have internet access, which that happens. And so our whole thing is like, beyond sports, do the kids have food? Right. Yeah. So we make our captains and myself, and this is one of the big things I say, if you're, one of my captains, and any coach that listens to this can really use this. Any captain you have, I tell them, if you know of someone that's struggling with something, because sometimes kids won't tell you, like they'll just, soldier on through and they don't have enough to eat, but they're not going to say anything because they don't want to.
Right. Nobody to know.
Yeah, they're young. They don't understand that. They don't want anybody to know. So I would say my captains, if you know somebody struggling, that's exactly right. We check on them. My captains, in every single one of our calls, we always, at the end, we go, hey, and my captain is most proactive is this guy, Brian Nowitzki, very, very proactive kid. He puts his phone number in there, and he said, if there's anything, if you don't feel comfortable talking to coach about it, you text me, and then I'll engage coach if we really think it's something that's really important that he needs to be engaged. But trying to find those guys in your team and your assistant coaches as well that can be proactively involved with helping everybody in the community. And that's an important thing, because it doesn't matter what team you're on. There's somebody that's struggling, and a lot of times you won't know it because they won't say something. But I try to make sure, and this is, everyone can do this, make sure that they have multiple points that they can touch to get help. So, if you only say, hey, if you need help, contact me, contact me and just make it. Well, there are kids that aren't comfortable going to the head coach. Right. Your freshmen, they may not even know your head coach, right? So you have multiple contact points, and you have the players make sure they check on them. They check on everybody else and make sure if there's something that we need to do or we need to get them help with, we do it immediately. And we say, don't be shy about it. Talk to your friends. And even if you just tell your buddy, and if you tell your buddy, then it's his responsibility to try and reach out to a captain or to the coach and say, hey, so-and-so has some issues here. What can we do? And, this is what I love about football. Most football communities, whether you're winning championships or you're not, most football communities really rally around the students and the players, and they try to help them as much as they can. It's one of the reasons why I've always loved the game. It's like a family environment. You have so many people in your program, and so huge family. But it's important to check on those kind of kids, and definitely check on the kids that won't say anything. Yeah. And it's important to check on those kids because they won't say anything, and like I said, they'll soldier on through, and they'll be struggling, and maybe we could have helped them with something.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, since you told me you were a coach. Do you have a problem with parent involvement as far as your booster club?
Well, I welcome it. Okay, so now I know coaches are all over the map on this. The way I look at it is, and it can serve good and bad, because I've dealt with both good and bad on it. I look at it as the more parents are involved in the program in a positive way, that's only going to help the program as a whole push forward. That's an important thing. Now, what you have to do is establish boundaries as a coach. That's important. If you establish boundaries that everybody understands, it's communication. Everybody understands that, hey, this is okay and this is not okay. Right. And if we recognize something that's not okay, I'm going to point this out to you, because we've established this communication of here's what the boundaries are. And one of the things I always say is, like, we need the booster club. We need to raise money. Like, we need, right. You probably experience this as well. Like, you guys travel all over the country to play, and right. We travel as well. Like, we play our first game at Rutgers this year. And if everything, goes according to plan, we'll be okay there. But we got to travel and all that kind of stuff. And your budget, and the parents are a huge part of that. The business and the community are a huge help in that. And I think the booster club with the parents are critical to that. But the big thing is communication. So I always say, you could talk to me about whatever you want. But if you go and say, why is this kid playing versus that kid? That's not going to be a good discussion. What I'm going to discuss with you is here's what I think your child can do better
Right.
to give him a chance.
Right.
But what I may see and what you may see may be totally different. And if I'm coaching the team and I'm in charge of the team, and my assistant coaches, we gather their input and we decide to put players on the field that we think will do the best job. And look, there's been times where we started out with certain players on the field that we thought were better, and we were wrong, and we changed it. And and sometimes I've had parents, and you probably see, I've had parents cuss at me after the game. If I lost a playoff game, I've had them cuss at me. And one of the things that when I was a young coach, I was a head coach really young in my career. I was 30 years old, 31 years old. I was the first time I was a head coach, really young. And I thought I knew everything I was doing, but I look back and I probably didn't know anything. And one of the things I learned is to not take it personal when a parent is upset. Now, if someone physically attacks me, we can't have that.
Your car.
Right. Don't slash my tires or anything. That I'm going to take personal. But, if you're upset after a game, one of the things I try to tell parents all the time is I call it the 24-hour rule. Game ends, win, lose, or draw. The best thing you could do is hug your son, go on home. If you want to talk about the game at home, go do that. Go get something to eat.
Right.
Take a breath.
Right.
And then if there's something that's really that important in the morning, then you go and talk to coach about it. And one of the reasons why I say that is, and it happens since I've been coaching, this will be my 19th year coming up. Every year somebody gets mad after a loss, and it's not like we lose a ton of games, but we lose a game. Someone gets mad after a loss and says something they shouldn't say.
Right.
And they end up regretting it because most of the time it's a kid that I love. It's very rarely if your kid's playing already for me, I probably like him.
Right.
And but you're just upset that maybe I didn't get him the ball,
right.
or maybe I yelled at him or something. And if you just take those 24 hours and wait, you'll realize, okay, that was kind of on the heat of the game, and your child, I love him. I'm playing him. He's one of my favorites, obviously. So you take a deep breath on it. And that's why I try not to take it personal, and just try to move on. One of the things parents should be aware of, and any good coach should do this, when you do have an issue after, the best thing you could always do is make your athletic director aware of it, because it's important that if something does need to get addressed right away, or somebody's safety is threatened, that's important on either side, right? That's important. But also if sometimes an athletic director, especially if you got a good one, can reach out to the parent and say, the next day before you go and talk to the coach and say, hey, is everything okay?
Right.
What are you sad about? Because the athletic director really wants the program as a whole to succeed. He's not worried about that individual game as much as the parent and the kid, and just say, everything okay? I was just upset. He made a really bad call there, and I kind of lost my head. And say, hey, give coach a call, tell him it's no big deal, or do you want me to have coach give you a call and say it's no big deal?
Right.
And I think that's important. And it really, again, it comes down to communication, right? The better the communication is between everyone, the better off the program is going to be as a whole.
That's good. I think it's about everybody knowing their role, and everybody once you know your role, you stay in your role, you stay in your place. But this is that right there is a whole nother show is to bring on a coach and talk about playing time, and should the parent come to the coach and ask about their son playing time, or should the athlete come. I mean, we as parents, we have all of these different questions. So we're gonna have to invite you back on as a coach and come and talk to you as a
Love to.
coach, because we need to educate our parents as far as what our roles are. Because some of them are single moms, they didn't know anything about sports, and their son all of a sudden is in the game, and they're learning as they go, and they don't really understand their role as a parent. So we have to get this information out. We have to educate them on what their role is. And as parents, we need to be team parents. Just like we want our kids to be on the team and be a part of the team, we as parents have to come together and be a team of parents to support the coach, which is going to support the team, and which is going to support the school, which is going to support the community, which, it's just a whole collective body, and how everybody is important if they understand their role. And so this has been a great show, and I look forward to bringing you back on and us digging in here and talking some more about this. Probably maybe after we come out of quarantine and you do actually have a date for your camp, bringing you back on, and so you can invite our guests on to your camp, your kids to the camps, and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm glad to. Anytime you let me know, and I'll be glad to come on. It's a pleasure. I could talk all day about this.
All right. Well, you guys, this is Karen from Can We Talk Sports, trying to bring you as much information as possible that you can chew on during this time of quarantine. So once we get out, once we're released, you'll know what to do. So thank you guys for joining us. Good night.
Good night.